All right, now in our second video on section 9.3, we're still looking at solving quadratics using square roots, but now we're going to find out about the number of solutions. And we have three problems staring us in the face right here that we're going to look at in this video. And let's jump right into it. So we're actually going to begin with problem 6. This is pretty much a review of what we did yesterday or what we did in the last video. And you're going to find that, it's pretty much the same song and dance that we've already seen. So we need to get our 2x squared by itself, and we're going to accomplish that by adding 16 to both sides. So that leaves us with 2x squared. 24 plus 16 is 40. Then we got to divide by 2. That leaves us with x squared equals 20. And then we need to take the square root of both sides. So let's go ahead and square root x squared and square root 20. So the square root of x squared is, of course, x, and we're going to go ahead and take our work up here. And then we have plus or minus the square root of 20. Now, the square root of 20 is not totally simplified yet, so let's break 20 down into its factors and figure out if we can pull anything out. So in this one, we look at this. All right, well, 20 is equal to 10 times 2, and 10 is equal to 5 times 2. We got two 2's here. Well, we can pull out a pair of 2's since this is the second root of 20, and that is how many we need to be able to pull out of our square root sign. So we still have our plus or minus. Whoops, it should be x equals, and then plus or minus. The 2 comes outside of our radical, and we're left with the 5 on the inside. So we have two solutions. There, x is equal to positive 2 square root of 5, and x is equal to negative 2 square root of 5. And if we go down to our number of solutions here, we were looking at the form of x squared is equal to d. And where d is greater than 0, x squared has how many solutions? Well, in example 2 here, this was the point where we had x squared is equal to d. X squared equals 20. That was when d was greater than 0. And in this instance, we had 2 solutions. So if our d value, when it's sitting right here, is greater than 0, we have 2 solutions. And this is what I would characterize as being the conventional case. It's what you'll see most frequently. But it's not the only one that happens. If we backtrack a little bit and take a look at number 5 here, let's solve it using the same method we did before. So I'm going to isolate the x squared term by adding 10 to both sides. So we have x squared left on the left side, and then negative 10 plus a positive 10, well, that's a 0. Interesting. And then, of course, we take a square root to both sides. So I square root x squared, I square root 0. We end up with x is equal to plus or minus 0. Well, 0 isn't really plus or minus, so we would just say x equals 0. And that is our only solution, because negative 0 and positive 0 are the same thing. So that means that when our d is equal to 0, as it did here, we have just one solution. And the one solution does not always equal 0. We'll see an example in one of the later videos where that will not be the case. But you'll be able to see the types of problems where that'll be the case, and you'll be able to start to see it coming, because we do definitely have a 0 somewhere in there. All right, and then question 3 is, what happens if d is less than 0? Because we've already covered the case where we have d greater than 0, d equals 0, but what about if d is less than 0? What about if we have a negative number? So let's go ahead and explore number 7 here. So number 7, we'll see what happens. As you might be able to imagine, number 7 will be the opportunity where we'll find a d less than 0. So we'll start by subtracting 3 from both sides, because I got to get negative 2x squared, our x squared term, alone again. And I do that by using our opposite operation. 27 minus 3 is 24. And then in order to get x squared alone, I got to divide by negative 2. That gives us x squared equals negative 12. And you might be saying, well, this looks pretty much the same, although we are currently sitting at an instance where d is less than 0. So let's take the square root of both sides and see what happens. So we have x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 12. And at this point, you're stuck. And the reason you're stuck is because we can't take the square root of a negative number. So this example has no solutions. Taking the square root of a negative, as far as we're concerned, is illegal. So you get to this point, actually, you don't even need to take the square root. You can just look at x squared minus 12 and say, I can't take the square root of that. That would be an illegal operation. And then from there, you know that we have no solutions. So once you get to the point where you have your x squared term equal to a number, if the number is bigger than 0, as it was in this example and the examples we saw in the previous video, we're going to have two solutions. This is what I think is the normal case. If it equals 0, then we're going to have one solution. So in this peculiar example, we ended up with x squared equals 0. Plus or minus 0 is 0, so we had one solution. And in this one right here, where our d value was less than 0 and we had x squared minus 12, that means we will have no solutions because you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So now you have an opportunity to practice a few of these problems, identifying their solutions in the guided notes.